Snipers, you have to see what's happening to the Bitcoin price this Monday as we have a new weekly candle. And so I want to start on the weekly chart. Notice how we have an indecision closing, and realize this. If we look at what's happening right now, we're staying below this 50-week and 20-week moving average and the 200-day moving average. And so I do want to address a potential scenario where Bitcoin has seen an overextension to the downside. And we could potentially assume that this wasn't a flag pattern that wanted to break to the upside, and it did break to the downside, unlike the initial flag here, which immediately broke to the upside. And so we could assume this being one downside move, and a flag pattern is forming in order for us to see a continuation to the downside. Now, do I think that we're going to be seeing price levels down to the $38,000 to $34,000 level? I think that in an extreme scenario, this would be the most likely target that Bitcoin could potentially go towards, where we follow this market structural support level that has held us since we've seen Bitcoin's new all-time highs. And then, of course, this right here would be the worst case scenario before accumulation can occur. And by that time, maybe the 100-week moving average will move towards this area. And so I just want to address this on the weekly chart. I know I don't talk about macro a lot, but I think that that's something to just consider. On the daily chart, we're below the 200-day moving average, opening up the week. And so that is showing us that there is weakness inside of the sentiment in the short term, and that there's certainly potential for that downside scenario to come on the table. I think that, Bitcoin taking the elevator down to the mid $30,000 levels might be a little bit too extreme with institutional adoption that we've seen over the last 2 years. I think that we may stair step our way down if we do start to see a downside scenario potentially come in place. And then 38,000 would probably be the area that we'd start to see some volume come in before we maybe have a little bit of a longer slowdown and potentially ladder our way down before a final move, and then we see continuation of price discovery and new all-time highs. I think that this is something that we have to also consider just more in the medium term. I'm really just trying to do a little bit more macro here on a Sunday. Of course, traditional markets just opened up with futures, but they haven't opened up with their spot. And so, looking at the 6-hour chart, if we address the volume here, we're not seeing much institutional participation at this point. The most recent institutional participation was sell pressure. And so, as I mentioned from that weekly chart, maybe we have an overextension at this point to the downside move that we may need to see a little bit more downside and some levels below 40,000 get tested before we see the reversal back to the upside. I don't think Bitcoin can get too far below its 200-day moving average before it's going to get back above it. But there is an upside scenario, and I say that because most of our daily candles so far have held the 200-day moving average. Today, this candle has 17 hours left. It could certainly go towards the 200-day moving average. We get above this level, as I've been saying, 47,900, 48,000 is really the level. Then that's all we need for some potential upside targets. And so I think that with a lot of bearish sentiment in the market, the likelihood that we can test lower levels is on the table, but I don't see anything too extreme. I want to talk about the total market cap here, staying above the 200-day moving average. We get below it, no big deal. 1.78 trillion, major support. That could be a bottom here before continuation to price discovery, maybe in early Q1 or maybe early Q2 of 2022. And so Ethereum, notice here, maintaining price action above 3650. So it's showing that it's a strong area of support, and that even if we were to break it, that the potential that we can get back above it is going to be quite high. But Ethereum has a huge range below 3454. So we break that level, that's showing confluence now at the 200-day moving average. 1980 becomes the support in the range. I'm sure that we'll find some support in the midpoint of the range, as we always talk about here on the Snipers channel. When there's a large range, the midpoint tends to act as support. Not much happening in Bitcoin dominance, and the altcoins don't really want to go into futures markets right now just because there's really nothing going on yet. Until spot opens up, then we can start addressing those. But I just wanted to talk a little bit more macro today for Bitcoin. I think that it's a time where dollar cost averaging positions, especially if we see further downside, that might be a smart idea. I mean, if you're bullish on Bitcoin as an asset at the 200-day moving average, it's certainly not a bad place to be dollar cost averaging positions. If we get lower prices, that's even better. But at some point or another, I'm expecting a reversal. I think Bitcoin has a lot more room to grow in 2022 and certainly in the next decade. And so we're still very early on this asset. I'm still very bullish on Bitcoin, regardless of us sitting here at the 200-day moving average. So thank you all for tuning in to our early Monday update. As that weekly candle closes, I like to get a video out, and I'll see you guys next time. Snipers out.